This is an independent virologist and vaccine expert who's also his credentials include he's formerly employed at Gavi. I don't know what Gavi is. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we've got 3 papers, all of which he's just written and posted on his LinkedIn page, and he's also got a few YouTube interviews out now, and he is basically trying to raise the alarm about the risk of mass vaccination of the sort of vaccines that we've got now during a pandemic, being, he is arguing, likely to actually cause COVID-19 to become a much worse problem than it already is, and in fact become a global nightmare, the likes of which we've never seen. That's his statement. That's it. That's his position.
And he does say, I think he alludes to the fact that he has a manuscript that covers this, that he is putting through proper channels, but he says we don't have time, which is why I'm posting it in this way.
Yeah, so there's a March 13th, a March 17th, and a March 6th. And he's also given a ton of references, which I have not had time to look through the vast majority of them yet. But the basic framework is we are not thinking about this evolutionarily, and the refusal to do so risks a whole lot of humanity. And that is a base claim is a perfect match for what we've been saying from the beginning, that we need to think about what this virus will do, how it will change. Understanding, therefore, its origins affects what we can imagine it will be able to do quickly if it came directly from either a primary or secondary host, or if it experienced gain-of-function research and serial passaging in a lab and therefore is already sort of pre-adapted as of a year plus ago to human hosts. These are not merely academic questions. They actually potentially affect human health, and he brings that into the vaccine framework specifically.
I don't find that this is like the Judy Mikovits situation where there were claims that were made that were simple enough to falsify that it just red flags all over the place.
Yep.
In this case, I don't have that.
Or those 2 doctors out of Kern County early, last spring, who were making a lot of claims that just were easily falsifiable.
Yep.
This is not that.
This is not that. So at the basic level, and I think your summary is right, the basic argument that we are not thinking evolutionarily about what we're doing, and we are blindly stumbling into this landscape, we are intervening in a way that could make things worse and not better, is accurate. And I definitely think, we are long overdue to be having an evolutionary conversation about this virus and our approach to it. His point is that there is a stage after you have been vaccinated the first time and before you have been vaccinated the second time and had the period in which for your immune system to become specifically targeted, that you are effectively weakly immune, and that weak immunity therefore selects for the invisibility of the virus to the vaccine. The partial immunity that people get from this vaccine on the way to being immunized is,
assuming they're effective,
is an evolutionary pressure that these vaccines do not appear to be good at preventing people from transmitting viruses that they've already been infected with. I'd like to know if that's the case. I know that this has been suspected.
This has been suspected, but I saw that claim here too. I mean, there's no reference. Like, I don't know this to be true yet.
But let's say it is true. His point is that what we are effectively doing is creating what is, to unfortunately use the same word I just used, in effect, like running a gain-of-function experiment with humanity by creating a concentrated evolutionary pressure for the invisibility. And he imagines that very disastrous things could be the result of this, which I don't think are certain, but are plausible as far as I can tell. So
I agree. If there's a slow rollout and the virus can't get purchase on increasing numbers of the older population, that it is going to evolve precisely to become more likely to infect younger people. And he argues, I believe, in one of these papers, that because we also have at the same time children who have been pretty isolated for a long time and who are now about to go back into schools, that this may create sort of a perfect petri dish situation.
Well,
I don't.
let me
I'm not sure
clarify.
I buy this.
Let me clarify his argument, just so we know at least know what we're talking about.
Okay.
So he makes two arguments.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, related to what we've already talked about, is that our behavior deploying what he says are prophylactic vaccines in the midst of a pandemic. So his point is, and he makes very clear he's not an anti-vaxxer, he's very pro-vax.
Mm-hmm.
But his point is, look, if you were to deploy these vaccines in advance of a pathogen arriving somewhere, it might be very effective at ratcheting up the immune response so that the virus would not get a purchase on the population. If you do it in the context of a pandemic already in motion, his point is what you're doing is you are confronting a virus which has the capacity to evolve with a concentrated
With selection pressure.
With a selection pressure. And his point is it cannot help but push this virus into an arms race, which I think is right and is consistent with what you and I have said. And that arms race is very likely to have these other consequences, which is where this point about young people versus old people comes up.
Just one point of order, though. You said that he says, and I see it in the papers too, he calls it prophylactic vaccine. That seems redundant to me. Vaccines are inherently prophylactic. Prophylaxis being about prevention,
right,
rather than retreating of symptoms.
It's an individual versus population level question. When he says a prophylactic vaccine, he's talking about the population level. And for an individual, yes, it's prophylactic either way.
So you think that his argument there is that the vaccine itself is designed to be prophylactic at a population level, and it is being used in a situation where the population has already been so widely exposed and continues to be exposed that it is not being deployed in a way that is consistent with prophylaxis.
Right. And there is a very powerful evolutionary argument here, which is it is the arms race that creates the ferocious enemy, right? Mm-hmm. And so you do not want to invite an arms race you cannot win. And so we're making a move that we shouldn't make because what it's going to do is turn our enemy much more dangerous than it is. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's true. I think there are ways in which this could be false, but it is not obvious to me that it is false, right? And in fact, the arms race part of it is almost certain to be true. Mm-hmm. So the second part of the argument, and there is one part of this that may be well known, but I don't know it, and so I'm cautious about it. But his point is that actually by keeping young people away from each other and society, that we are weakening their what's called innate immunity. So, and he deploys a model that I think is quite valuable the way he puts it. Basically, that we start out with innate immunity, that is to say, an immune system
in our lives as neonates,
right? Yeah. That doesn't have to generate novel insight. So when we get sick with something like the flu, we've never seen it before. It gets past our defenses, and then we build an immunity to it, and then we build a memory of that immunity, right? So that is adaptive immunity, and it's actually one of the most marvelous evolutionary stories there is. It's evolution that takes place in your lifetime, inside your body, between your cells. So young people have the innate immunity, but it is not programmed with the adaptive component, which results from encounters with things in the world.
We expect our adaptive immunity to get better over time.
Right. And so the model he deploys is over time, as you age, your innate immunity weakens, you get more vulnerable, but your adaptive immunity grows better because it has seen the things in your environment for the most part.
It becomes wise.
Right. It becomes wise. Exactly. And so the point is older people are feeble with respect to their ability to keep stuff out, but they're better with respect to being able to fight stuff that their immune system is aware of. Now, the part of this that I think is insecure, and it may be that it is well known.
The part of his argument that you think is insecure.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding.
It's right there to the left of the, yeah.
So my understanding of this is all kind of old because came from a course that involved that textbook. But in any case, the argument he makes is that the innate immunity, and he uses a bad analogy, but if we can correct it, I think what he means to say is that the innate immunity is in some sense like a muscle, that to the extent that your innate immunity is not encountering things in the wild, it stands down, it atrophies. And so by isolating young people, that we would be reducing their capacity to fend off, why are young people immune to this? It's not because their immune systems are aware of COVID. It's because their immune systems are good at generally dealing with stuff and preventing it from getting in your cells.
They don't have adaptive immunity. They do have very strong innate immunity. This does raise the question of why so many pathogens are so much more likely to attack young people. But to generalize further what you're saying by analogy to muscles is what he is saying. The argument is that innate immunity is anti-fragile, right? That it becomes better with insult. It becomes better with pressures against it.
Right. And so anyway, I want to know, and the problem is that there are two arguments that overlap. So George Carlin had a very famous routine in which he argued that he didn't get sick because he had swum in the Hudson, and right. But anyway, so the point
the old
is,
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger argument, right?
Right. And the point is, we know that this will have some reality over an adaptive immunity space, that in effect, the challenges cause your immunity to learn about things in the environment. The argument that it's happening on the innate immunity may be true, but I want to see the evidence that it is.
Yeah.
But anyway, the consequence of all of this is, his point is, we are creating what he is arguing is effectively a perfect storm in which we are setting up an arms race with the virus, where the virus will mutate away into invisibility to the immune system. So we will educate the immune system, basically like putting up a wanted poster in the post office that alerts the immune system to who it's looking for. The enemy will disguise itself and be able to move in without being spotted, and that will then result in it honing in on young people who have not been exposed and are therefore vulnerable, and basically they would be a reservoir of potential victims of the virus, and that this could create a catastrophe. So I think where I come out on this is, this argument definitely needs to be heard. What I don't want, and what we are forced to effectively by the way that we are dealing with this pandemic, is I don't want either people with perverse incentives to tell us why this isn't true, right? What I want is people who are immune to pressure, right, and aware of various different relevant aspects of this, to be able to have a conversation in which they determine it. Because effectively what he's arguing is that we should pull these vaccines, right? That we are in fact going to destroy herd immunity, which would grow, right? Grow with huge costs, right? We are going to destroy the herd immunity that we've already inadvertently invested so heavily in, and create effectively a novel and much worse, much more infective pandemic. Now, that is a plausible argument. Is it a true argument? I can see ways in which it could be. I can also see reasons that it might not be. But the discussion is where you would find that out. You need people who are sophisticated about the evolutionary stuff to have, a candid conversation with each other about what would the effect of this be if X, Y, or Z. And I have very little doubt we're not going to get that discussion.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I don't know where that leaves us. I think I'm glad that he's out there saying what he's saying, and I would like the conversations between people who are interested in truth and who do not have perverse incentives to be happening. And instead, it just seems like there's a rapid fire exchange of, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And no, it couldn't be because it doesn't suit my worldview responses.
Well, I would say I see that, but I also think that, the most frustrating aspect is, why are people dealing with this as if they are not intervening in a complex system, right? This is something that you and I have been saying consistently, which is, you're dealing with the most complex of complex systems. You're talking about intervening in immunity, where you have, evolutionary phenomenon on the part of the immune system, evolutionary phenomena on the part of the viruses, and interaction.